Take a look at Amara, Kelechi said with a mocking laugh, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Still wearing that same fake I'm fine smile. His friends burst into laughter. 8 years after the divorce, and she's still by herself, one of them sneered. Some people never find their way back. Kelechi's lips curved into a smug smile. She was so convinced that pride would carry her through. Now look at her, showing up here, hoping people still remember who she is. The laughter spread through the hall, but Amara didn't react. She didn't defend herself. She didn't flinch. She simply looked at them with an unsettling calm. Then the doors at the far end of the hall opened, and just like that, the laughter vanished. It was as though someone had reached into the room and switched off the sound. What happened next was something none of them had prepared for. So settle in, because this story isn't what it seems. Amara stared at the cream-colored envelope resting on her dining table as though it might disappear if she ignored it long enough. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, unmistakably familiar in a way that tugged at memories she'd spent years trying to bury. The invitation had arrived 2 days earlier. She hadn't opened it. Instead, she'd set it aside, promising herself she'd deal with it later. But later had come and gone, and the envelope remained exactly where she'd left it, silent, patient, demanding to be acknowledged. That evening, as the golden Lego sunset filtered softly through her curtains, she finally picked it up and slid a finger beneath the flap. Inside was a thick sheet of formal stationery. Class of 2008 reunion. The words stood boldly across the page. A slow breath escaped her. 8 years. 8 long years since she'd seen most of those people. She lowered herself into a chair, the paper trembling almost imperceptibly in her hands. Memories surfaced before she could stop them. Laughter spilling through classroom corridors. Arguments during lunch breaks that somehow ended in friendship. Dreams spoken boldly, without fear, without hesitation. Back then, everyone had been certain of who Amara would become. That girl is destined for greatness, her teachers used to say. She's going to make a name for herself, her classmates often added.
Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wild Shadow Tales for more emotional and inspiring stories.
A small, humorless smile touched her lips. Life had rewritten that story. Her phone buzzed, dragging her back to the present. Ada, please tell me you've seen the reunion invitation. Ada said the moment Amara answered. I've seen it. And nothing. Amara replied quietly. I don't think I'm going. Ada let out an exaggerated sigh. Amara, it's been 8 years. 8. You can't spend the rest of your life running from anything connected to your past. I'm not running from anything. Even in her own ears, the words sounded weak. Really? Ada challenged. Or do you just not want to see Kelechi? The room suddenly felt smaller. Amara closed her eyes. It's not about him. Ada laughed softly. Maybe not him specifically, but it's definitely about what he represents. Amara said nothing. Instead, her gaze drifted toward the framed photograph sitting on the shelf. Her university graduation. She stood alone in the picture, smiling with complete certainty that life would unfold exactly as she'd planned. That version of herself felt like someone she'd once known, a stranger wearing her face. I don't see the point, Amara admitted after a long silence. What am I supposed to do? Walk in there and prove I turn out fine? Impress people who stopped thinking about me years ago? Ada's voice softened. No, you go because you survive what you thought would destroy you. Amara swallowed hard. You make it sound easy. It's not, Ada replied. It's painful, but it's necessary. You rebuilt your life, Amara. Quietly, yes, but beautifully. Don't let your history convince you that you're less than who you are. Amara looked back at the invitation. The venue was one of Victoria Island's newest luxury event halls. Saturday evening. I'll think about it. You'd better do more than think, Ada warned playfully. Because if I have to, I'll show up at your apartment and drag you there myself. When the call ended, silence settled over the apartment once again. Only now it wasn't empty. It was crowded with thoughts she'd avoided for years. Her mind drifted back to the last time many of those classmates had seen her. She had been newly married, standing beside Kelechi with pride shining in her eyes. He had been magnetic. confident, the kind of man people admired without questioning why. People called them the perfect couple. They're made for each other, someone had whispered that night. Amara had believed it. God, she believed it. Slowly, she exhaled. The arguments returned to her memory. The sarcastic comments disguised as jokes. The dismissive remarks that chipped away at her confidence. The exhausting nights spent trying to save something only she seemed willing to fight for. Their divorce hadn't exploded into public scandal. There had been no screaming matches, no dramatic scenes. It ended quietly, painfully, like waking up one morning and realizing the love had died long before either of them had the courage to admit it. Afterward, Amara disappeared from many circles. Not because she hated people, because survival required distance. She had to rebuild more than her life. She had to rebuild herself. She rose from her chair and walked toward her bedroom, the invitation still clutched in her hand. Opening her wardrobe, she studied the carefully arranged clothes hanging inside. Her life had become intentional, simple, free from noise and performance. Was she truly ready to walk into a room full of people who only remembered the woman she'd used to be? Sitting at the edge of her bed, she stared at the invitation again. "I'm not her anymore," she whispered. Then another thought slipped in. Maybe that's exactly why I need to go. The reunion hall glowed beneath elegant lighting, conversations buzzing with excitement as old classmates embraced and traded stories. Amara paused outside the entrance. She smoothed the fabric of her navy dress, a design chosen not to impress anyone, but because it made her feel comfortable in her own skin. "Breathe," she murmured. Then she stepped inside. The sound hit her immediately. Familiar faces. Older now, changed by time, yet instantly recognizable. For a heartbeat, it felt as though she'd stepped into another life. "Amara," she turned. A former classmate stared at her with wide eyes. "Oh my goodness, it's really you." Amara smiled politely. "It's been a while." After a few quick exchanges, the woman was swept away by another group. Amara accepted a glass of juice from a passing waiter and moved toward a quieter corner. Observe first, engage later. She had just begun to settle when she felt it. Someone watching her. Her gaze lifted across the room. Kelechi, standing near the bar in a perfectly tailored suit, laughing effortlessly among a crowd. Their eyes met. For the briefest second, his expression shifted. The amusement faded. Something calculating flashed beneath it. Then his familiar smile returned. Amara's chest tightened. Her face remained unreadable. She looked away first and took a measured sip from her glass. Footsteps approached. "Well," he said smoothly, "this is unexpected." His voice hadn't changed. Polished, confident, sharp enough to wound if you weren't paying attention. Amara turned to face him. "Good evening, Kelechi." His eyes moved over her. "You look different. People change." He chuckled. "Some people do. Others just get better at pretending." She didn't react. She had expected this version of him. "So," he continued casually, folding his arms, "has life been kind to you?" "It has." His head tilted. "That's good. I used to wonder whether things ever improve for you after everything." There it was. The insult hidden beneath concern. Amara met his gaze. Life usually finds a way of balancing itself. Kelechi laughed under his breath. "Interesting perspective." He leaned closer. "Did you come alone?" Amara stepped back, reclaiming her space. "Yes." A knowing smirk appeared. "I thought so. Starting over at our age isn't exactly easy." A few nearby classmates glanced over, sensing the tension beneath the polite smiles. Amara's lips curved slightly. The things worth having rarely come easily. For a split second, something flickered across Kelechi's face. Annoyance. Then it disappeared. "You always knew exactly what to say," he remarked. "And you always assumed you knew everything," Amara replied. His smile tightened before recovering. "I've missed this," he said lightly. "Our little battles." Amara remained silent. "Enjoy the evening," he added, adjusting his jacket. "Try not to take things too personally." "I don't anymore," she said softly. As he walked away, Amara released a slow breath, tightening her grip around the glass. Nothing about him had changed, and somehow everything had. Around her, The reunion grew louder. Laughter echoed through the hall. Old friendships reignited. But beneath the celebration, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that this night was moving towards something none of them saw coming. And when it arrived, it wouldn't just change how people remembered her. It would force them to question everything they thought they knew. Amara had managed to avoid Kelechi for most of the evening. She drifted through brief conversations with old classmates, offering polite smiles and careful answers. But no matter where she moved, she could feel him in the room, like a shadow that refused to stay behind her. Amara, a familiar voice called from across the hall. She turned to see someone waving her over to a larger group gathered near the cocktail tables. Reluctantly, she walked toward them. The moment she arrived, she saw him. Kelechi. Ah, perfect timing, he said with a grin that looked friendly from a distance and dangerous up close. We were just reminiscing about the old days. Amara forced a courteous smile. You remember how ambitious she used to be? Kelechi asked the group, always chasing the biggest dreams. A few people laughed politely. She had a 5-year plan for everything, he continued. 10-year plans too. He chuckled and shook his head. But I guess life teaches you that planning isn't always enough. This time, the laughter was softer, uneasy. One of the men shifted awkwardly before clearing his throat. Well, life happens. Kelechi nodded. Exactly. Life happens. Some people learn to adapt. His gaze settled on Amara, and others spend years trying to recover. The energy around the table changed instantly. Amara could feel it, the subtle shift of eyes, the unspoken invitation for her to defend herself. And what about you? Someone asked Kelechi quickly, try to redirect the conversation. He shrugged modestly. I did what I could, he replied. I try to make things work. He glanced at Amara again. Of course, not everyone makes that easy. Silence settled heavily between them. Amara slowly raised her glass. Most people do the best they can with what they know at the time, she said calmly. Kelechi smirked. That's a diplomatic way of saying things fell apart. Amara met his eyes. Sometimes things end because they're supposed to. The tension became impossible to ignore. One woman laughed nervously. Well, at least we're all here now, she said, older and wiser. Kelechi grinned, some more than others. Amara held his gaze. She refused to give him what he wanted. No tears, no anger, no performance. As conversations resumed around her, her thoughts drifted inward. Kelechi's words echoed faintly in the background, but they no longer landed the way they once had. Because the truth was simple. He didn't know her anymore. He didn't know about the nights she spent studying after the divorce, fighting exhaustion as she rebuilt a career from the ground up. He didn't know about the consulting projects she accepted for almost nothing, using each one to sharpen her skills and reclaim her confidence. He didn't know about the mornings she woke up terrified and chose to move forward anyway. He didn't know about the day she realized she no longer needed approval from people committed to misunderstanding her. And he definitely didn't know about Chinendu. The memory came unexpectedly. The first time they'd met had been at a charity foundation event, far removed from flashy reunions and carefully curated appearances. He'd stood quietly near the back of the room, observing, listening. You don't talk much, Amara had said that evening. He'd looked at her thoughtfully. I found that people reveal themselves when you stop interrupting them. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't charming. It was honest. And, somehow, that had been enough. Amara blinked and returned to the present. Across the room, Kelechi laughed loudly again, completely unaware of the woman standing in front of him. For the first time that night, Amara didn't feel angry. She didn't feel hurt. She felt clarity. The reunion regained its rhythm. Laughter, old jokes, conversations stretched thin by nostalgia. Then, as often happens, the mood shifted without warning. Casually, dangerously, they were gathered near a tall cocktail table now. Ada stood beside Amara, steady and alert. Across from them, former classmates smiled through polished confidence and curiosity disguised as friendliness. Music softened as someone began speaking near the stage. Still, their small circle continued talking. So, Ifeanyi asked brightly, leaning closer, Amara, are you married now? Everything around them seemed to pause. Not the entire hall, just this little circle. The people nearest leaned in slightly. Eyes sharpened, breaths held. Even Ada's fingers tightened around Amara's wrist. Before Amara could answer, Kelechi laughed. Too loudly. Married, he repeated. The word itself sounded ridiculous in his mouth. Let's hope she found someone capable of surviving her standards this time. A few people laughed automatically, the kind of laughter born from discomfort rather than amusement. It faded quickly. Ada's eyes narrowed. Kelechi, she said evenly. That wasn't funny. He raised both hands. Relax. It's a reunion. We're joking. Amara looked directly at him. She knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted outrage. A sharp response. A public scene. Proof that she was difficult. Emotional. Impossible. Proof that his version of history had been true all along. Instead, she lifted her glass, took a slow sip, then smiled. Yes, she said quietly. The single word sliced through the noise. Yes, I'm married. Silence. Real silence. Someone's mouth fell open. Another person's eyebrows shot upward. Ifeanyi gasped. Amara, why didn't you tell us? Kelechi's smile tightened. His eyes searched her face, looking for hesitation, for uncertainty, for cracks. Married, he repeated. This time, the confidence in his voice had dimmed. Interesting. Beside her, Ada's expression softened into quiet satisfaction. One of the men recovered first. Congratulations, he said quickly. That's wonderful. What does your husband do? Amara's voice remained calm. He works in infrastructure. Infrastructure, another classmate asked. Like construction? Related, Amara replied. He values privacy. That answer transformed the atmosphere. It drew a line. It made it clear that her marriage wasn't entertainment. At the same time, it sparked curiosity, because mystery has a way of making people lean closer. Kelechi shifted beside her. Infrastructure, he repeated slowly. That's a broad description. He smiled. Contractor? Engineer? Amara's expression never changed. He does what he does, she replied. And we're happy. Soft laughter followed. But this time, nobody was laughing at her. Kelechi noticed. So you've been hiding an entire husband from us? He asked. You used to enjoy attention. Ada stepped forward. Amara never liked attention, she said. She liked peace. Her gaze hardened. You just never understood the difference. The silence that followed was heavier. People stared into their drinks, checked their phones, looked anywhere except directly at Kelechi. His smile flickered, then returned. Ada, he said with forced amusement, still fighting battles that don't concern you. They concern me, Ada replied, when someone keeps trying to humiliate another person for sport. Ada. Amara's voice was soft. Ada looked at her. The tension in her shoulders eased. Amara didn't want war. Not because she feared conflict, because she refused to turn Kelechi's performance into the headline of her evening. Ifeanyi clapped once. Okay, she said brightly. No fighting. Tonight is supposed to be fun. Then she turned back to Amara. But seriously, where's your husband? Didn't he come with you? He's running late. The words slipped out before Amara fully processed them. Not exactly a lie. Not entirely the truth. A shield. But the moment she said it, she understood its significance. The possibility of his arrival shifted the balance of power. Kelechi caught it instantly. Running late? He repeated. His eyes narrowed. So, he's coming? Amara nodded. Yes. A tiny movement tightened Kelechi's jaw. Gone almost immediately. We'll see, he said. After that, the group's energy changed. The sharp edges softened. People asked ordinary questions. What have you been doing all these years? Consulting. In what field? Educational property development. A man blinked in surprise. You help schools build and manage better facilities? Amara nodded. Planning. Partnerships. Development. It's meaningful work. The admiration this time wasn't forced. That's impressive, he admitted. Kelechi listened quietly. His smile looked increasingly strained. He had expected failure. He had expected desperation. He had expected to be the success story. He hadn't expected her to be grounded. As the group drifted toward the dance floor, Kelechi leaned closer. So, he murmured, you're married now. You still don't show off. Amara looked at him. I don't need an audience to feel secure. He chuckled. Or maybe you're afraid people will discover the truth. Amara smiled. People usually find exactly what they're determined to see. For the first time all evening, Kelechi had no comeback. He stared at her, recalculating. Then he straightened his jacket. Well, he said lightly, I hope he actually shows up. His smile sharpened. I'd love to meet the man who finally managed to tame Amara. Her voice remained gentle. No one tamed me, Kelechi. She paused. I simply grew. He blinked, then laughed. But the sound didn't reach his eyes. Amara turned away. The questions had been asked. The assumptions had been challenged. And without raising her voice once, she had altered the direction of the room. She didn't need to explain herself. She only needed to stand in the truth she'd fought so hard to build. Everyone else could adjust. A few moments later, the reunion coordinator tapped the microphone. The chatter dimmed. All right, everyone, he called cheerfully. Look at us. After all these years, we're still standing. And some of us still look 25. Laughter erupted. Amara moved toward the side of the hall. Not hiding, just choosing space. Ada remained beside her, scanning the crowd like a loyal bodyguard. You're handling this better than I expected, Ada whispered. Amara smiled faintly. I'm just existing. Ada shook her head. No. Her voice dropped. You're winning without trying. She glanced across the room. That's exactly why he's unsettled. Amara didn't answer. She didn't want to think about Kelechi anymore. Then she noticed movement near the entrance. At first it was subtle. 2 people turning their heads. Then 3. Then an entire ripple of attention spreading across the hall. Even the coordinator paused mid-sentence. He looked toward the doors. A surprised smile appeared on his face. Oh, he said into the microphone. Looks like we have one more guest. People shifted. Necks stretched. Curiosity swept through the room. Amara felt something move inside her. Not fear. Instinct. The grand entrance doors opened wider, and a man stepped inside. Tall, composed, dressed in a dark suit tailored with understated elegance. Nothing flashy, nothing desperate. His hair was neatly trimmed, his expression calm. A strong jaw, measured eyes, the kind of presence that didn't demand attention, yet somehow commanded it. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look around for approval. He didn't seem impressed by the room, or intimidated by it. He simply walked forward, as though he already knew exactly where he belonged. And without realizing it, the entire hall held its breath. He walked forward with quiet certainty. No hesitation, no need to announce himself. And the moment Amara recognized him, her breath caught in her throat. Chinedu. Beside her, Ada's eyes widened. He came, she whispered, disbelief and relief colliding in her voice. For a second, Amara couldn't move. It wasn't that she thought he wouldn't come. It was that Chinedu rarely attended places built around appearances. He avoided rooms where people performed versions of themselves. Yet here he was, walking toward her. His steps were measured, unhurried. His gaze remained steady. People instinctively moved aside without being asked. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Even the clinking of glasses seemed to soften. As he drew closer, the reunion coordinator lowered the microphone and stepped aside with an amused smile. Chinedu stopped in front of Amara, and then something shifted. The composed expression he wore for the world softened. Only slightly, but enough for those paying attention to notice that this version of him belonged only to her. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his voice meant for Amara alone. The meeting lasted longer than expected. Amara blinked, trying to steady the emotions rising unexpectedly inside her. You didn't have to come. I know. His eyes held hers. I wanted to. No speeches. No grand declarations. Then, gently, he took her hand. Not possessively. Not for an audience. Simply to reconnect. He lifted it slightly and pressed a brief kiss against her knuckles. The gesture was small, respectful, intimate, and somehow it carried more weight than any dramatic display ever could. The entire hall seemed to stop breathing. Near the front, someone whispered, "Wait, is that?" Another voice responded immediately, "No, it can't be." Then a man standing near the bar leaned forward, his expression transforming into disbelief. That's Chinedu Obiaker. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. The name spread through the hall like electricity. Chinedu Obiaker, the industrialist who rarely gave interviews. The man behind companies connected to highways, ports, power infrastructure, and projects that quietly reshaped communities. The billionaire who never dressed like he needed anyone to know he was one. Amara didn't watch the crowd. She watched Chinedu. He turned toward those nearest to them and nodded politely. "Good evening," he said. Then, without ceremony, he added, "I'm Chinedu, Amara's husband." That was it. No titles, no explanations, no performance, just truth. The stunned silence that followed was almost louder than applause. Someone laughed nervously. Others exchanged glances. A few people suddenly seemed fascinated by the floor. Several steps away, Kelechi stood frozen. The smug ease he'd worn all evening disappeared. Disbelief, confusion, something dangerously close to panic. They battled behind his eyes as he stared at Chinedu, almost as though refusing to accept what reality had become. Ada leaned toward Amara. "Please look at his face," she whispered. Satisfaction laced every word. Amara didn't answer. She wasn't interested in humiliation, but she couldn't deny what had changed. The atmosphere itself felt different, lighter, more careful, as if respect had entered the room and quietly taken a seat. A woman approached first, smiling too brightly. "Sir," she said eagerly, "it's such an honor. I had no idea Amara was married to you." Chinedu offered a polite smile. "We don't advertise our private life." The woman laughed quickly. "Oh, of course." But her admiration couldn't be hidden. Amara finally spoke. "Chinedu, this is Ada." He turned immediately toward her friend. "Thank you for standing by her when I couldn't." Ada blinked. The sincerity caught her off guard. "Always," she managed softly. Before anyone could say more, Kelechi stepped forward. His confidence had returned. Or rather, he was trying desperately to put it back on. "Chinedu Obiaker," he said, extending his hand. "Small world." Chinedu looked at the offered hand before accepting it. His grip was firm, respectful. His expression remained calm. "And you are?" The question landed harder than intended. Kelechi's smile twitched. "Kelechi." He hesitated, then added, "Her former husband." Silence. Again, because suddenly everyone understood the story they'd been witnessing all evening. Chinedu's face didn't change. He nodded once. "I see. Nothing else. No possessiveness. No rivalry. No attempt to establish dominance." As though Kelechi wasn't an opponent. Simply part of Amara's history. Kelechi laughed awkwardly. "We were young. People change." Chinedu met his gaze. "People learn." Kelechi searched his face for arrogance, for superiority, for anger, anything he could fight. But there was nothing there. No ego to challenge. No insult to answer. No weakness to exploit. For the first time that night, Amara felt relief settle into her chest. Because this moment wasn't about proving she'd survived. It wasn't about showing Kelechi what he'd lost. It was about forcing everyone in that room to confront a truth they hadn't expected. The woman they pitied. The woman they whispered about. The woman some had quietly judged. Had rebuilt her life into something so solid that it no longer required explanation. The reunion coordinator cleared his throat. "Well," he said with nervous laughter, "this reunion just became a lot more interesting." Scattered laughter followed. "Please continue enjoying yourselves." The music returned. Softer now, as though the room itself had become more thoughtful. People approached Amara differently after that. The mockery disappeared. Their voices gentled. Curiosity remained, but it was wrapped in respect. Meanwhile, Kelechi stepped back. For the first time all evening, he no longer knew what role he played in the story he'd been narrating. "Are you okay?" Amara asked quietly. Chinedu looked only at her. "I'm fine." Then his voice softened. "Are you?" Amara nodded. "Yes." And this time, she meant it. Completely. They moved to a quieter corner of the hall. Chinedu pulled out a chair before sitting beside her. It was a simple gesture, yet people noticed. Because genuine care doesn't usually announce itself. It reveals itself. Ada smiled. "I'll give you two some space." Then she pointed toward Amara. "But I'm nearby if anyone decides to lose their minds." Amara laughed softly. Thank you. A few classmates approached again, this time with admiration instead of curiosity. Amara, Uche said, shaking his head. You really kept this quiet. It wasn't a secret, she replied gently. It was private. Privacy is peace, Chinidu added. Uche laughed. I like that. Another woman leaned forward. So how did you two meet? Amara hesitated. She didn't want their relationship reduced to reunion entertainment. Chinidu answered for her. At a foundation event. He glanced toward Amara. She was focused. A faint smile touched his lips. I admired that. The woman laughed. That sounds exactly like Amara. Serious, someone added. Chinidu shook his head. No. He looked at Amara. Intentional. The room fell quiet, because everyone understood the difference. Admiration without competition. Love without control. Respect without fear. Someone joked. Amara, you had all this because you didn't want to spraying money at your wedding? Laughter erupted. Even Amara smiled. Our happiest decisions, Chinidu said calmly, were the ones we made away from applause. A murmur of agreement spread. But what made his words powerful wasn't how they sounded. It was how he lived them. Across the room, Kelechi watched, like a man staring through glass at a life he no longer understood. Eventually, he returned, dragging forced friendliness behind him. So, he said, pulling out a chair without invitation, roads, ports, power projects. Impressive. Must be stressful. Work is work, Chinidu replied. Kelechi laughed, then glanced at Amara. Well, marrying Amara probably comes with its own challenges. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Ada stopped walking. Amara remained composed. Chinidu looked at Kelechi. Challenges? You know, Kelechi said quickly. She's intense. She likes things done her way. He smiled. Not every man can handle that. Chinidu nodded thoughtfully. Then those men shouldn't marry women like her. The silence that followed was different. Not awkward. Revealing. Kelechi forced a chuckle. You're very calm. Calm is a decision, Chinidu replied. Amara lowered her eyes briefly. Not to hide emotion, but to steady it. Because she suddenly understood something devastating. For years, she'd wondered whether she had truly been difficult. Too much. Too ambitious. Too demanding. And now, sitting beside a man who valued those exact qualities, she realized the truth. She had never been the problem. A nearby guest cleared his throat. I've been following your company's power expansion project in the East, he said to Chinidu. It's remarkable. Thank you. Then he turned to Amara. You're blessed. Amara smiled softly. I'm grateful. Kelechi stood abruptly. I'll be back. No one stopped him. As he walked away, the table relaxed. One woman leaned closer to Amara. I won't lie, she admitted. Some of us judged you after the divorce. Amara met her gaze. It's okay. No, the woman replied quietly. It wasn't. She hesitated. I'm glad you're happy. Thank you. When she left, Amara turned to Chinidu. You didn't have to respond to him. I wasn't responding to fight him. Then why? He paused, then answered with quiet certainty. Because I refuse to sit beside you while someone turns your strength into a flaw. His gaze held hers. Not in private. Not in public. Amara swallowed against the sudden tightness in her throat. I'm okay. I know, he replied. Then his voice softened. But being strong shouldn't mean standing alone. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Music drifted through the hall. Laughter rose and faded around them. Amara looked across the room. People weren't watching her with pity anymore, and they weren't laughing at Kelechi's jokes. They were reconsidering. Ada returned carrying bottles of water. Drink, she ordered gently. Then she looked at Chinidu. Thank you for coming. Thank you for loving her like family, he replied. Ada's eyes softened. She deserved better than what she got. Ada, Amara warned. I'm not causing trouble, Ada said quietly. I'm telling the truth. Across the room, Kelechi stood alone near the bar, watching, his expression strained. Not because Amara had sought revenge, but because time had done something far more painful. It had exposed him. Are you staying long? Amara asked. As long as you want. And then, we'll go home. Amara nodded. I'd like to greet a few more people. Chinidu rose and offered her his hand. Then let's do that. Together, they moved through the reunion. Not as a spectacle, not as a trophy, but as a partnership. Amara greeted old teachers, shook hands with classmates, shared quiet smiles. Chinidu remained beside her, never interrupting, never overshadowing, simply present. And that presence accomplished what wealth never could. It reminded everyone in the room that dignity isn't something you earn from public approval. It's something you carry, and the right people protect it without being asked. The music returned to full volume. The reunion moved on, but the mood around Amara had shifted forever. It wasn't just the whispers of, "That's her husband," or the sudden politeness. It was subtler than that. People hesitated before speaking now, as though revisiting old opinions and realizing how wrong they had been. Amara noticed it in the smallest details. The classmate who once overlooked her now offered her a chair. Conversations lowered whenever Kelechi walked past, and eyes followed him with something they hadn't held before. Not admiration, not envy, but caution, because the loudest version of a story isn't always the truest one. And sometimes, the biggest shock isn't discovering who someone married. It's realizing the person you underestimated had been quietly rebuilding all along, while everyone else was busy believing the wrong narrator. Amara didn't chase the change in people's reactions. She didn't pull anyone aside to correct old assumptions. She didn't stand in the middle of the hall delivering speeches about everything she'd endured. She simply moved through the room. She greeted the people she genuinely wanted to see, stayed close to Ada and Chinidu, and obediently drank water whenever Ada insisted. For Amara, the reunion had stopped being a battlefield. It had become a mirror. And for the first time in years, some people were being forced to see themselves clearly. Hours later, after another round of announcements from the coordinator, after group photographs had been taken and retaken, after the dance floor had filled and emptied again, an old classmate approached her. Nika. She had always been observant in school, never the loudest person in the room, never dramatic, but she noticed things other people overlooked. Now, she wore the careful expression of someone carrying a truth she wasn't sure she had the right to reveal. "Amara," she said softly, "can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course." Chinidu's hand rested lightly against the small of Amara's back, a silent question. "Are you okay?" Amara gave him a small nod. Ada noticed the exchange immediately and followed at a respectful distance, far enough not to intrude, close enough to step in if necessary. Nika led Amara toward the quieter hallway near the restrooms. The music faded into the background. The laughter sounded distant. Nika exhaled heavily. "I'm not trying to reopen old wounds," she began carefully, "but I've been watching Kelechi tonight." Amara's expression remained calm. "He's behaving exactly the way he's always behaved." Nika's eyes softened. "That's the problem." She hesitated. For years, people convinced themselves it was harmless. They said he was joking. They said you were too serious. Her voice dropped. "But tonight, it's obvious." "Obvious how?" Amara asked. "That he's trying to make you the villain." Amara lowered her gaze briefly. "He's been doing that for a long time." Nika swallowed. "I stayed in touch with your cousin, Aoife. Not closely, but enough. And I knew someone who worked with Kelechi's family business." She chose her next words carefully. "When your marriage ended, stories spread." Amara didn't react. She remembered them. The whispers, the judgments, the certainty of people who had never lived inside her reality. "They said you were proud," Nika continued, "that you couldn't submit, that you embarrassed them." She shook her head. People repeated it like it was truth. Silence stretched between them. "But I heard other things," Nika said. "Not gossip. Things that actually made sense." Amara's chest tightened. "What things?" Nika looked away for a moment before meeting her eyes again. "I heard that he was reckless with money, that you were the one trying to create stability, that he disappeared for hours and came home angry, that he made you feel guilty for asking ordinary questions." Her voice softened. "I heard he used humiliation to control situations. Small jokes in public, silent punishment in private." Amara's throat tightened painfully. The details weren't new. She had lived them. But hearing another person say them aloud felt different, like someone had finally acknowledged the weight she'd been carrying. Nika lowered her voice. And I heard you didn't leave because you wanted freedom. She paused. You left because you wanted dignity. Amara's fingers curled at her sides. For years, she had swallowed those truths whole, never defending herself, never explaining, never asking anyone to understand. Now, the words sat between them. Visible. Real. I tried, Amara whispered. It was the first time she'd admitted it out loud in years. I tried to make it work. Nika nodded slowly. I know. Then she corrected herself. No, I believe you. Behind them, Ada stepped closer. What's going on? Nika's finally saying what should have been said a long time ago, Amara replied quietly. Ada's expression darkened. People didn't want the truth. They wanted an easy story. Nika lowered her eyes. Maybe, but tonight, people are starting to see. Amara exhaled. Seeing it now doesn't change what happened. No, Nika agreed. But maybe it changes who carries the shame. Amara looked toward the main hall. Through the opening, she spotted Kelechi. He was laughing with two men. Too loudly. His confidence looked rehearsed now. Every few moments, his gaze drifted toward her. Checking, measuring, searching for signs that people still believed him. Nika followed her line of sight. He knows, she whispered. He can feel the room slipping away from his version of the story. Amara remained silent. She didn't want that kind of victory. It felt hollow. What do you want me to do with this? She finally asked. Nothing, Nika said immediately. I'm not asking you to confront him. I'm not asking you to explain yourself. She hesitated. I just couldn't stand there and watch him rewrite your life in front of people who didn't know better. Tears threatened behind Amara's eyes. And I wanted you to know that Nika's voice softened. Some of us saw how hard you fought. Amara looked at her. Thank you. Relief washed across Nika's face, as if she had finally put down a burden she'd been carrying for years. Enjoy your night, she said before walking away. Ada touched Amara's arm. Are you okay? Amara released a slow breath. Yes. Ada frowned. You don't have to be strong every minute. Amara's lips curved faintly. I'm not being strong. I'm just here. They returned to where Chinidu stood waiting. He hadn't followed. He hadn't interrupted. But he hadn't disappeared either. He studied Amara's face carefully. Everything okay? She nodded. Someone finally said what should have been said years ago. Good, Chinidu replied. Ada folded her arms. The room is starting to realize Kelechi has been performing all night. Chinidu glanced briefly toward the bar before returning his attention to Amara. Let the truth do its work. His voice remained steady. You don't have to do anything. Something inside Amara relaxed. Not because she needed rescuing, but because she no longer felt responsible for fighting ghosts. When they stepped back into the hall, the atmosphere had shifted again. People greeted Amara more gently. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked admiring. Most looked thoughtful, because this reunion had become something far bigger than nostalgia. It had become a reckoning. Kelechi noticed it too. He floated from conversation to conversation, laughing harder than necessary, touching shoulders, making jokes, trying desperately to regain control of a story that no longer belonged to him. But no amount of charm could rewind the room. Amara didn't celebrate. She simply kept moving forward, steady, quiet, allowing truth to settle where lies had lived for too long. As the evening drew to a close, an elderly teacher held Amara's hands warmly. I'm proud of you, she said. You look settled. Amara smiled. Thank you, Ma. Chinidu stepped away briefly to take a call. Ada drifted off to say goodbye to someone. For the first time in a while, Amara stood alone. Kelechi. His voice had changed. No smile. No performance. Can we talk? We're talking, Amara replied. He stepped closer. You planned this. What? You brought him here, so people would look at me like I'm a disgrace. Amara held his gaze. I didn't tell anyone how to look at you. You want them to think you're better than me. I didn't come here to compete. He scoffed. Then why hide him? His voice sharpened. You married for money. Just admit it. For the first time all evening, disappointment crossed Amara's face. That's the last mistake you'll make tonight. Kelechi frowned. What does that mean? It means I didn't marry him because of money. Her voice remained calm. I married him because he's kind, because he's steady, because he never needed me to become smaller so he could feel bigger. Kelechi stared at her. You think people choose love because of money? She continued. Maybe that's how you see relationships. But I didn't lose myself because of wealth. She paused. You didn't lose me to another man's success. You lost me because of your character. The words landed harder because they weren't shouted. Kelechi swallowed. So, I'm the villain now? Amara shook her head. I'm not painting you as anything. You've been showing people who you are all evening. He hesitated. Then almost quietly he asked, so, are you happy? The question carried years inside it. Years of assumptions. Years of believing she would regret leaving. Years of believing she'd never recover. Amara answered without hesitation. Yes. Nothing more. Just one word. And somehow, it shattered the illusion he'd been holding on to. Because the woman he thought would never survive without him stood before him calm, whole, and free. Chinedu returned then. Kelechi forced a weak smile. Enjoy your evening. Then he walked away. Are you all right? Chinedu asked. I'm fine. Do you want to leave? Amara looked around the hall. The music, the laughter, the version of herself she'd once left behind. Then she nodded. Yes. They left quietly. No speeches. No dramatic exits. Outside, Ada wrapped Amara in a tight hug. You handled that beautifully. I just existed. Ada smiled sadly. Exactly. That's what unsettled him. Your peace. After saying goodbye, Amara slid into the car. City lights blurred past the windows. Inside, silence settled comfortably around them. You were quiet tonight, Chinedu observed. I didn't want to carry the past with me. And now, Amara looked ahead. Now I don't think I have to. After a pause, she spoke again. Do you know what surprised me? Tell me. I wasn't angry. She considered it carefully. Not the way I thought I'd be. What did you feel? Amara smiled faintly. Clarity. She stared out at the passing city. He didn't become someone different. He just got older. Her voice softened, and I realized something. I outgrew him a long time ago. Chinedu nodded. That's closure. Amara breathed deeply. Yes. They drove in companionable silence. Not empty silence. Safe silence. The kind built by trust. When they arrived home, Chinedu walked around the car and opened her door. I didn't think you'd come, Amara admitted. His eyes warmed. I didn't want you carrying that room by yourself. He paused. Even if I knew you could. Emotion tightened her throat. Thank you. You're my wife, he said simply. What matters to you matters to me. Inside their apartment, everything felt ordinary. She slipped off her shoes. He loosened his tie. He hung up his jacket. The reunion suddenly felt distant. Like visiting a neighborhood she'd once lived in but no longer called home. Amara sat on the sofa. Her thoughts drifted briefly to Kelechi, to classmates, to old judgments. Then she realized something. She wasn't thinking about him anymore. She was thinking about herself. About the woman who survived things she never spoke about. About the version of herself who rebuilt quietly while nobody was watching. You did more than survive, Chinedu said softly. Amara smiled. Tonight, I didn't feel like proving anything. She leaned back against the cushions. I just felt free. He nodded. Then the reunion gave you exactly what you needed. The past hadn't disappeared. It had simply lost its power. For Amara, the night didn't end with Kelechi's embarrassment. It didn't end with shocked whispers about billionaires. It ended with something quieter, something stronger. A woman walking away from a room that once held her deepest pain, realizing it no longer owned her. Amara turned toward Chinedu. I'm glad I went. A small smile touched his lips. So am I. And just like that, the reunion became what it had always been meant to be. Not a stage for revenge. Not an opportunity to impress strangers. But the place where the past finally loosened its grip. Where shame changed hands. Where truth stopped whispering. And where a woman discovered that dignity was never arrogance. It was self-respect. And no one had the right to ask her to shrink it. Thank you for watching. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories about resilience, love, and second chances. Until next time, remember this. The people who misunderstand your boundaries may call them pride, but the right people will recognize them for what they've always been, the quiet courage to choose yourself.